Hi, welcome to my first wrap-up ever. I'm filming on my phone because I have a lot of books I want to talk about and my camera intimidates me. My hair is going to annoy me the whole video, but what is new? It's looking very voluptuous today. Anyway, I read 16 books in the month of June, which sounds like a lot, but most of them were graphic novels because I was trying to ease back into reading after being kind of in a slumpish area. With starting my channel, everything going on in the world, it's just very, very hard to concentrate on a book right now. The books I am talking about in this video aren't all the books I read in June. Certain books didn't really hit, or I just don't want to talk about them, or I don't want to recommend them, or I have nothing to say about them, so I didn't include them. And I think that's going to be a common theme in my wrap-ups. I'm just going to be talking about books that I genuinely want to talk about. My bookshelf's back there, but this is a new angle. If I do that, is that better? I think that's better. I think that is better. Okay, so I have a few notes down here, and I just want to talk about the books I read. This is my first wrap-up ever, so bear with me. We are going to be kind of all over the place, but you signed up for this, so yeah, I'll be starting off with the novels I read and then going into the graphic novels I read. First, we are going to be talking about the Folk of the Air trilogy, and I've been waiting to talk about this. I'm not going to explain what the series is about because we've been new. Little backstory, I read The Cruel Prince last year in 2019, last summer actually, and I gave it 1.5 stars, rounding it down to 1 star. I hated the bully romance aspect of it, and I hated the problematic relationship portion, and some of y'all are gonna get mad at me for thinking the relationship is problematic, so I'm not gonna get in that debate because read what you want to read. I'm not like shaming you for it. I love enemies to lovers as much as the next girl, but what I like about my enemies to lovers is that there's secret pining going on. I don't really like the really mean parts of it. I know I sound like a 4-year-old, like y'all are being mean to each other. Overall, I just thought in The Cruel Prince the characters were just so unlikable. The world building was incredibly uninteresting, and there was just nothing for me. It was honestly a 1-star read before Jude and Carden actually hit it off, and I just wasn't expecting it at all because everyone loves that book. I believe Kat from Paperback Dreams described it as a high school bully romance in a poorly built fae world, and like I couldn't agree more. She also said that it got better, and so did many others. So I'm like, maybe I will give it a try. Maybe there is something in there that I was just missing and I judged the book too harshly. And I'm kind of glad I did decide to continue. Let's talk about The Wicked King. I gave this book 2.5 stars, rounding it down to 2 stars. My rounding and whatever, my 0.5 stars doesn't make any sense, but it makes sense up here, so we're gonna roll with it. The Wicked King started off very boring. As I said before, I hate this contemporary type fantasy thing. I think I'm just so used to seeing the mortal world and like the fae world being so separate in high fantasies that when you like muddle them together, I don't vibe with the writing. It's just like, what was the reason?
What was the reason? What was the reason? What was the reason?
The only reason I could think of is that they needed somewhere to banish people in, but you can just make a whole different realm for that. Like, why do you keep the mortal world? Like, what does that provide? I guess it provides Jude's backstory on where she came from, but I think there's better ways to make someone vulnerable in the fae world than just saying that they're immortal. It's very hard to get trapped in such an intricate world when you can go to Pizza Hut in like 30 minutes. You see what I mean? Like, it just didn't really connect to me. This book also made me question the pacing of it. Like, what is the point? What are we leading up to? Where is it? What I did like about it is Jude. Jude is a brilliant character. She's painted to be an intelligent, manipulative, cunning person, always looking out for her back while she's stabbing someone else in the back. But the moment Jude is betrayed or something awful happens to her, she's like that Pokemon meme. I'm like, girl, your whole brand, your whole mantra is independence. Never trust anyone. You got eyes at the back of your head. Why are you so surprised? Why are you suddenly at a disadvantage when people betray you? Like, that's what you're supposed to be planning for. I don't understand why she's so reliant on other characters when she can clearly conquer anything by herself. Also, with Jude and Carden's relationship, I personally didn't see any complexity. To me, it was just petty hate. I felt like they were reaching for something that just wasn't there. I don't understand how they're your OTP. Like, what do they provide for you? I don't see it. I question it. I really question like the dynamic. Carden also is just essentially so useless. Like, what is the reason for him to be there at all? This should be a solo Jude novel because that's what I would be in for. In fact, what is the reason for any man in this book to be there? Maddox, Carden, Belkin, Locke, every man in this trilogy is just essentially insufferable. All of them can choke. Only Jude gets right. Jude also has a twin named Taryn, and like, on behalf of all twins, as a twin myself, I want to apologize for Jude to getting stuck with her. Like, Taryn is essentially a Karen. Like, she was the worst. Another thing I didn't understand is why the flippity flip would Jude care about Elfame? Like, what has Elfame ever done to her? Why does she care about its survival? Elfame could drown in the undersea for all I care, and I would be fine with it. I would not bat an eye. I'm just so confused what this land has ever done to Jude. Like, they don't deserve you, honey. You deserve better than Elfame. But around 70% of the book, my opinion changed, and I actually started liking the book. Like, imagine, dare I say, I was excited to read Queen of Nothing? Who would have thought? I have to give it to Holly Black. Even though I don't care one bit about any of the other characters, I would read the series just for Jude and for Jude only. And that's that. If I liked more of the characters, I would have liked the book earlier. Okay, Queen of Nothing. I mentioned this in my mid-year book freakout tag, how it was a book that really surprised me. I almost gave it 5 stars, but around 75% of the book, they started speaking parcel tongue, you know, and I didn't vibe with it after that. This is where it gets spicy. Some people say Queen of Nothing is worse than The Wicked King, but like, how could you possibly say that? This was better on so many levels. I finished this in one day. I had a blast. I also kind of did 360 on Taryn. Like, she kind of grew something there that like I didn't know she had in her. Also in this book, towards the end, there was just some integral plot points that were completely dropped. We completely dropped one character. Like, he never came back. There's also this really important event that happens to Jude at the end of The Wicked King, and we just like never resurfaced it. Like, there was nothing ever really mentioned about it. Like, it was just brushed over when it was such a big cliffhanger that we ended on. I was also just kind of tired of Jude. I wanted her to move on. I don't know what she sees in Carden. Like, why is he there? Like, you can do everything you want without him. Carden is supposed to be a character that is like foolish and like stupid on the outside, but on the inside he's like really cunning and deceptive and has like tricks up his sleeve.
You guys, I'm like really smart now. You don't even know.
But he just lets Jude walk all over him all the time, as he should. I'm not complaining. I would let Jude walk all over me. But that's besides the point. I would honestly die for Jude, no questions asked. She's such a Capricorn. Never has a book made me like it more as the series went on as this series has. If Holly Black were to write like a spin-off series with Oak and Surin and like a hate to love, I would be here for it and I would read it. All right, moving on, we have The Upside of Falling. I first saw this on like an Instagram post or something, and I just wanted to send myself back a little bit. It's a short book. I finished it in one night. I gave it 1 star. It's essentially about this jock football player who's never had a girlfriend, this shy, quiet, nerdy girl who's never had a boyfriend, and then they like fake date and whatever. And I thought I would be here for it. Those are just like the type of books that like there's a few gems that you gotta find because some of them just hit different, and this book absolutely did not hit different. It's not like I expected it to be like great, but like I didn't expect it to be so bad that I would give it 1 star. It reminded me so much of a Wattpad novel, and then I realized it's because it was written on Wattpad before it was in a book format. Which, there's nothing wrong with Wattpad, obviously, but you just get that vibe, if you know what I mean. Some of the Goodreads reviews say there's like depth and emotion to this, but like where? We were reading different books. There was absolutely nothing going on here. The main characters were bad. It's just my personal preference to like complexity and emotion in the characters, and this book just didn't deliver. It was just so boring. There was absolutely nothing I retained from this. If it wasn't so short, I probably would have never have read it. So 100% do not recommend. The next book I have is Supernova by Marissa Meyer, which is the conclusion in the Renegades trilogy. I gave the first 2 books, Renegades and Arch Enemies, 4 stars, and I ended up giving Supernova 3 stars. I honestly thought this book would go a different way, which I think is the common consensus of it. I wanted Nova to pull an Adelina from Young Elites, if you know, you know, because I honestly did not care about where the relationship was developing between Nova and Adrian. I should explain what this series is about. It's basically a superhero story. There are the Renegades and then there are the Anarchists, which are like opposing sides, and they both have superhero abilities. Nova is part of the Anarchists, and she has to disguise herself as a renegade to get in and essentially infiltrate the renegade system. She meets this boy named Adrian, and she kind of sees things in a different light. I have read every single one of Marissa Meyer's books, and she's not like one of my favorite authors ever, but she's always an author I come back for because she's such a staple in the YA community. I'll link my Goodreads reviews on the first 2 books if you're interested on how I personally felt about them. This book just goes completely dark and horrifying in like a second. Like, there's no warning. And I think that happens with the Lunar Chronicles too, where the characters' backstories are honestly more tragic than the book themselves. Like, it's 0 to 100 real quick. The side characters were also super laughable to me. When you're pitching this idea of a superhero cast, and then you give these side characters like cookie cutter descriptions and absolutely no depth, I don't see what we're in for. My favorite part about the Lunar Chronicles was how all the characters had different friendships with each other. So I know Marissa Meyer has the potential to write a story about great characters characters, but the only characters we really focused on were the two main ones, Nova and Adrian. It was just a missed opportunity. Also, the thing with Nova is she's also painted to be a morally gray character. But the case for me for that is just so flimsy. It's just that all the side characters are essentially having one emotion or one personality trait all the time, when you're given two characters that have a little bit more personality and some spice, that they're said to be like different and they're said to have like depth to them. She's painted to be like a thought-provoking one who has like two decisions to make and doesn't know which is like the right path. I just don't see how her dilemma in this book was that big, you know, or that incredible, because there's essentially two sides. There's the renegades, which are good, and there's Adrian, and then there's the anarchists, which are opponents of the renegades, and that's like her family side. So those are your only two options. Like, that's not really like morally gray. There's not really an area that could like overlap, you know? There's just like the good and the bad. And there's a few reasons why you should be on this side, and the only reason you're on this side is because you've always been there. I didn't see what she was fighting with so hard in this book. That also goes along with, I believe Emma Book said this, that Nova's whole personality, her whole arc was kind of watered down in this, and I couldn't agree more. That's exactly how I felt. I want some spice to my morally gray characters. I love them as much as the next guy. In this book, as it was the end of a trilogy, the ending was wild for me, but I personally didn't enjoy it. It shouldn't be an ending where everyone sings Kumbaya, forgets the years of war and trauma, and moves on. Like, that's not what the story was building up for, but that's essentially what happened. The ending was crazy though. I just wish it happened 250 pages earlier. It didn't need to be this long. I have to hand it to Marissa Meyer though about her epilogues. Some epilogues don't hit it, but her epilogues, every time, they just get you somewhere. I also feel like there's other things worth mentioning, but as I said before, I don't really care. In the end, science fiction is just not my thing. If you're not invested in the story or Nova's journey, this book would be pretty boring for you. I just wanted something to pick up my enjoyment while reading it, and I didn't really get that. So I gave it 3 stars because I liked it. Next, I have A Torch Against the Night by TAHIR, which is the second book in the Ember in the Ashes quartet. I believe the 4th book is coming out this year, so I wanted to read the first 3 books, and I don't think I'm continuing with the rest of the series. I gave it 2 stars. I also talked about this in my mid-year book freakout tag. It's essentially about this 17-year-old girl whose brother got kidnapped, and it's her journey to find him. And then we meet this guy who is part of the opposing side who essentially captured her brother, and she just has to fight her way in this kingdom. I honestly don't want to talk about this book. I finished books pretty quickly, like relatively fast. I started this book back in March when COVID was starting, and I finished it in June. Like that's like a whole 3 months it took me to get through this book because I just absolutely did not want to pick it up. If somebody convinces me that the 3rd or 4th book is like completely monumental, then maybe I'll try picking up the series again and seeing if maybe just the 2nd book was bad, but it was just disappointing. The first book I gave 4 stars, and this book I thought started off pretty fine. I liked the relationship that developed between Elias and Leia, I don't know, I forgot her name. I started rooting for this book hard. It essentially just comes down to the fact that as the story progressed, I just didn't care about the characters. I feel like they were written with such intense love and care that I could see what the author was trying to do with them, but just the decisions at the end, like, that's not even the worst part of it. What I did like about this book was how it does focus on the relationship very much, but also has these like dark, twisted parts that I'm here for. I just didn't think it was a good balance. The twist in this book just essentially made me lose interest, which is the opposite of the effect it should have had. The magical realism part was interesting, but we're already in this Middle Eastern inspired Roman Empire-ish world, and now you add magic to it. It doesn't fit like that. It's like the Olympics, but now you have magical powers. Like, do you see what I mean? I didn't see how we headed in that direction. In the end, Leia just needs to get her priorities straight. Like, I get it, you're 17, but now is it really the time? Is it really the time to be this flaky with everyone? The only character that I essentially liked at the end of the book that I did a complete 360 on was Helene. Helene is the only character with depth. She's the only character I'm rooting for. The fact that she is not there for attachments like all the other characters, well, all the other 2 characters, is what I essentially liked when I distanced myself from the relationship that was building. I just think she was the only redeemable part, and now she's the only character that I care for. And I think that's a common assessment to make because the reviews I was reading for this book felt the same way. In the end, I think Supernova and A Torch Against the Night prove once I distance myself from the main relationships that are happening, I start to have different ideas of how the book is going to go, and when it doesn't go that way or it goes a bit slower than what I would have liked, I don't like the book as much. Okay, next on to the graphic novels I read for this month. I'm just going to start off by saying that art is a very important part of graphic novels, but I have no artistic experience. I know nothing about art, so I'm not going to be judging any of the artists' art styles. The first book I read is Wonder Woman by Leigh Bardugo, graphic novel version. I want to read this whole series in graphic novel format because, as I said before, science fiction, superheroes, not my thing. And I'm very glad I did, because I gave this book 1.5 stars, rounding it down to 1 star. Wonder Woman Warbringer is about Aaliyah, which is a descendant of Helen of Troy and is fated to bring hardship and misery on the world. And then there's Princess Diana, which comes from a legion of Amazon warriors, and they're in like 2 different worlds. Eventually they end up meeting and they essentially try to save each other. What I loved about it is I love when there's like mythical explanations for modern events, and I also thought it started off very strong. That's all I liked about it. What I didn't like about it is how heavy the plot was and how much dialogue there was. Like there didn't need to be that much in there. Again, I knew I wouldn't like love it, but I did not expect to like very much dislike it, and like it was a chore to get through. I thought there was a queer relationship actually forming between the 2 girls, and like it didn't happen. Like there was so much chemistry. It was missed opportunity. I don't know why it wasn't run that way. And I don't think I'm alone on this opinion of the book. Next, I have Batman Nightwalker by Marie Lu, which is like the 2nd book in the DC Icon series. This is essentially Batman's story. Do I need to explain what Batman's about? I don't really know, so. I gave this book 4 stars, and no, not just because it's Marie Lu. I honestly thought it was genius. I love the 2 characters that we explore here. I thought they had depth, and I thought their backstory was written very well. I love the plot twists that were taking place. Like I did not expect them. As I said before, I'm not like a Batman superhero type person, so I'm very glad I experienced it in this format. In the end, to me, this book was just a better story, and thus I liked it better. Next, I have Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, which is a female-female romance between Laura Dean and the main character, and Laura Dean isn't treating the main character right, and it's like the main character's story on her relationship and like her point of view. I also gave this book 1.5 stars, or rounding it down to 1 star. The thing about me is that I hate reading about problematic relationships, and that was this book. The main character just was not treated right the whole time, never stood up for herself. When I read books for the characters. How many times do I say characters in this video? I like to put myself in the characters' situations, in their heads, and analyze which way they go and why they made certain decisions. So when I'm reading a book about a character that's let someone walk all over them and doesn't treat them right, it just makes me so mad. It just makes me like want to be there and be like, you will not treat me like this. Also, I'm just so glad the reviews also feel this way, that this wasn't a well-liked book. And I was just confused on why people enjoyed the story, because I didn't enjoy how it progressed. The next book I have is Bloom, which is about Ari, who recently graduated from high school and is trying to like set a life for himself, but he is currently working at his family's bakery. And then we meet Hector, who loves baking, and it's a story about their relationship together and about love and how your decisions have consequences. I rated this 2.5 stars, rounding it down to 2 stars. It was just an overall book, like and that's again not an unpopular opinion. The characters just didn't give me anything, if you know what I mean. Like I thought they were cute, but like there was just no more. Overall, it was very cute, but it wasn't particularly memorable or particularly good. I was reading one of the Goodreads reviews for this, and it said that everything was fine and normal for like 90% of the book, and then the last 30 pages, things just go crazy, and it just comes out of left field, and that didn't really make sense to them, and I understand it. But those last 30 pages is when I realized I actually cared about the bakery, so I gave it like an extra 0.5 stars. So overall, just didn't really do anything for me. Okay, now on to more female graphic novel recommendations. The first book I want to talk about is Women World, which was wonderful. Absolutely loved it, gave it 5 stars. It's a book about where men have been eradicated. Just kidding, they haven't like been exterminated. They're just extinct. There's no men anymore. It was so funny to me. It was so pure. I laughed all the time. It explores the themes of femininity, feminism, and how women live in a world that's like with no men. They're not there anymore. We follow through multiple character lenses. There's transgender women, disabled women, there's talks about mental health. I do think there's some depth and nuance to it with today's culture and referencing misogyny and the patriarchy. I had to move the camera around. I hope we're still good. As I was saying, in the end, it was just such a pure book. We follow multiple characters and multiple storylines that happen, and I don't think any of them like clouded each other or like confused the other. I loved it. The next book I have is Honor Girl, which is another graphic memoir about the author's journey at summer camp one summer, and it's kind of a lesbian coming of age novel. I gave this book 4 stars. I read it knowing absolutely nothing about it, so it pleasantly surprised me. It really made me feel like I was in the story. I was at the camp that the author was in, and I was experiencing the things she was experiencing. I just thought it was really funny. I thought the author had some interesting moments in her life, and I enjoyed how the story took place. So thus 4 stars. I really liked it. Okay, 2 more books. Next we have Spinning, which is another nonfiction graphic memoir. It's about this girl named Tilly, and we follow her skating journey, her life as she discovers like who she is. This book was very emotional, but I personally couldn't rate it anything higher than 3 stars. I felt like the more emotional and gut-wrenching parts of the books were just glossed over, and we were kind of left to assume what happened, and I don't really like that. A lot of people who read this book say the story fell flat for them, which I don't really agree with, because I don't think coming of age stories have to be this big, monumental, life-changing event. The story that takes place just has to have a certain level of a retrospective change that gives a certain effect to the reader, and I think the story accomplished that. Now on to the last book that I read that I want to talk about in this video is Gender Queer. I didn't rate this book. Gender Queer is an autobiographical comic about the author's journey of self-identity. It's a story about trauma, family, and discovering what it means to be asexual and non-binary. It was incredibly insightful. I highly recommend it. I'm always researching and educating myself on how to be a better ally to the LGBTQ+ community, and books like these are a wonderful insight on things that you think you might be knowledgeable about, but you're really not. It was honestly a bit more graphic than I personally would have liked, so in the end I didn't feel comfortable rating it on my enjoyment versus the education I gained from reading the novel. So that's it. That's my June wrap up. I'm currently in the middle of quite a few books right now. I'm 60% through with Circe by Madeline Miller. I'm 70% through with Beach Read, and I'm absolutely hating it, so expect a good review for that. And I'm currently rereading Little Fires Everywhere. If you're curious of what books I'm going to be reading in the month of July, you can check out my TBR video for the reading rush. I'll link it up there and down there. Follow me on Goodreads if you're curious about what books I'm reading at one time. Thank you so much for the best month ever on BookTube. June was like a month like no other. Like, thank you so much. I just have very happy thoughts and I want to express all of them, but I don't know if you guys want to hear it, so thank you for watching.